Motion, please.
I'll make that motion.
Karen Councilman.
Okay.
Carol Smith, second. Trick.
Okay, Section A is the employment of professional personnel. Section B is the transfer of professional personnel. Section C is employment of substitute service personnel. Section D is employment of extracurricular personnel. Section E is a leave of absence. And Section F is for resignations. And at the bottom, we are rescinding the November 13th, 2012 approval for employment of Nicole Kravitz for Midway Elementary and Teacher K Kindergarten. That was for an overage. We no longer need this position. So we have abolished the posting of that for that particular position. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions of personnel? Okay, if no further questions, I'll call for a question. And all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody opposed? This vote also. Okay. We're down to comments, concerns. Let's go ahead and ask Mr. Lindbergh to do his presentation.
Mr. Wilkerson said he hoped to be out here by 9, so
You right on schedule.
in front of you, you have a notebook that has Lincoln County Board of Education data review. If you want to go ahead and open that up, those go along with the slides if you want to make a comment on the slide or a question for later. And over on the left side is another sheet that I'm going to be referring to is the annual measurement objectives for schools. I'd like to start out with talking about the West test, the future. We kind of started out, actually it's the past, the present, and the future. We started out several years ago, if you look at the sheet over on the left side, 2005 with what was called the West test. We had what was content standards, objectives, commonly known in education lingo as CSOs. Okay, when we got these were the highest rigor, we were told, and then in about 2008, we went to what was called West Test 2, which, and they changed them to the next generation CSOs. And we're on those until this 13 and 14. We test on those 2 more years. Okay, and then we'll be moving to what is called a smarter balance assessment with a growth model. And the growth model will be looking not so much what the scores were at a certain, it'll be following kids and students and grades. Did this student grow from year to year, which I think is the right direction to go. And we'll be transitioning to what's called the Common Core. If you look over on the left on the sheet that I was referring to, if you look down at the green, which says 2012, those are the starting points for AYP, what we call adequate yearly progress. If you look, there's some for elementary, some for middle school, and some for high school. And how these were set, there was some the field tests given in the first couple of years of testing, then they set the cut scores. And what I want to talk about is, like an elementary does not have an 8th grade in it, okay? A middle school is classified as having the 8th grade, and the high school is classified as having a 12th grade. And what that means is, like for example, if you look at reading, a student in the elementary, say if they're at Ranger, in order for that school to meet mastery in the 4th grade, they'd have to have 50.50% proficient. The same 4th graders in a middle school would have to have a higher score than they do in the elementary because of the way the cut scores were set. You know, which sometimes we get into that and people don't, some of the principals say, well, I had higher scores, but I didn't meet it, but that's just the way the cut scores were set at that time.
We've heard that before.
Yeah, we have. I'll go ahead, if you want to ago. And how these tests are set up at different levels is what's called DOKs. That's called depth of knowledge. It's how hard a question is. For example, DOK1's knowledge, recall, recognition. For example, who was the first president of the United States? And that's basically what West Test 1 was, a lot of DOKs 1. And then we went to the DOKs 2, which if you see, you have to apply some of that information. We would not have any DOK 4s on our assessment because that is something that's done over a period of time. We have what we call accountability language, the adequate yearly progress. Often we call that AYP. You'll hear people talk about AYP. Okay, in order to meet AYP, you have to meet the assessment standards separately in reading language arts and mathematics. For elementary schools, when this was set up, the state had to put another indicator in there, another measurement. So for elementary and middle schools, it was the each school has to have 95% of the students taking the test. And for the high school, the other indicator was the graduation rate, which would be 90%. In elementary, you had to have 90%, which I see Mr. Priestley kind of giggling there, but our attendance rate are great. That was almost a given. But as you'll see, also, before No Child Left Behind come along, you looked at schools and they just took the total scores of all the kids in the school. And for example, you would have a school that was real affluent and those scores up the top would bring it up for the whole school, but they're low SES or they're special ed students, they wasn't really accountable for them. But so when No Child Left Behind come along, you had to start making these scores in all these different subgroups. You have in the subgroups we have the subgroups we have usually is low SES and the special ed along with all students. And what's going on with this is a student could be in 3 of those subgroups. It could count for you 3 ways or against you 3 ways. In other words, you could have a student with special needs that's also low SES, would count in those 2 subgroups, and then would also count in your all students. So that student would count 3 ways. You had to have 50 enrolled in that group, as we look at some of these slides. If you did not have 50 low SES students, you were not accountable for that subgroup, but you were accountable for those students in the all subgroup, in the all. And assessment standards for a full academic year. What that means is a student enrolls. If they enroll after the 5th instructional day and do not leave until the day of the assessment, that school is accountable for. Okay, but if we have a student enrolled, say at Hamlin, and they're the 5th instructional day. Let's say in January they decide to go to Guyan Valley. Well, they wasn't there for a full academic year. Hamlin or Guyan Valley, it does not count on their AYP, but it counts on the county's AYP. Say if we have a student in the county that goes to another county, it doesn't count against their county, but it counts on the state's AYP. We've often joked about this, that some of the principals are just going to transfer everybody for one day. But I think we'd get caught in that.
Select students.
But that's what we're talking about. Okay, there's ways to meet AYP other than meeting the scores. They have what they call a confidence interval. And this is hard to explain. All I'm going to say is it's good. It means good for us. And if you look at it, what it says is sometimes there's such a small population of students testing. If there was a larger population testing, then the percentages would go up, and then you would probably meet that standard. So it's but it was a way that was set up to help other schools meet AYP. Then also you had what is called safe harbors, where if a subgroup that scored, decreased by 10% from the previous year, then you can make AYP by safe harbors. And then down, another way you can make AYP was averaging the past 3 years for a confidence interval. So those were the 3 additional things was put in there, but I've always tried to, when Dr. Watts was here, I had him, I said, Louis, what's this mean? He looked at me, brought in a page and had a formula this long. But that's basically what it means. But confidence interval means good. Okay, our AYP status for 2012, we had 2 out of 3 elementary schools that met AYP. None of the middle schools met AYP. Lincoln County High School did not meet AYP. Lincoln County Schools did not meet AYP, but we met AYP in elementary math and reading for the county. And if you see a C out there, that was because of confidence interval. Okay? And I will go into each school. Okay, this is kind of what we was giggling about a while ago. If you look at the attendance rate, the one other factor that you had to have for elementary was 90%. Well, you can look at the attendance rates, they're well above 90%. And for the high school, the other indicator was the graduation rate. And this changed in 2010-11. At one point, the graduation rate to meet AYP was 80%. It moved up to 90%.
Bill,
Yes.
do you want to go back and explain why Hearts did not have that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hearts, I should have done that, thank you. Hearts is a new school. So they're not accountable until they get, is it 2 years of?
Next year.
Yeah, they'll have 2 years that they're not actually accountable for AYP. I'm sorry about that. And if you look at her graduation rate at 09 and 10 was 84, then it went to 77.4%. Then last year it dropped to 75.2%. And what's down at the bottom is the difference between what we need and what the actual graduation rate was. Okay. Also, our dropout rate, and I wanted to talk about the dropout rate. It's not just students 9 through 12. Dropout rate is 7 through 12. And so often we do have kids who are 16 years old in the 7th and 8th grade that drop out. But you can look, in 2008-9 it was 3.2, then last year it was 1.7 for the county, and this is equivalent to how many number of our students that dropped out.
Do you know what the average is for the state?
No, but I can look that up. Yes, I can get that. Okay. Now, when we start looking at this growth on these charts, if you look, the blue is 2012. This is trend data. Red is 2011. Green is 2010. But what I ended up doing on this, if you look up to the top, we're looking at growth 2 different ways. Growth in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in math for the county. What that means is if you look at 5th grade, that's just 5th graders. If you look the last 3 years, our 5th graders last year scored higher than they did in 2011. Okay, that's just following those grades. But where we're headed is we're going to be following the students. If you look, for example, I have growth 5th to 6th, 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th. For example, if we look at math in the 5th grade, 2011 was red, was 38.31. Blue, 2012 in the 6th. These are the 5th graders that moved to the 6th grade. It went up. So that's what that means when it says growth to the next grade. It means we showed growth there. Okay, reading language arts. You can see we had growth in grades 3, 5th, and 6th, just in those grades. And we also had growth 4th to 5th, 5th to 6th, and 6th to 7th. And some of this 5th to 6th, 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th, when we see that's couple years ago, that was not there. That was some of our weakest areas of not growing, and we've really done a good job. People have in increasing achievement at those levels. Okay, also we give another assessment, and this is called the APTA, Alternate Performance Task Analysis, and that's for a certain 1% of our students with special needs. They also take an assessment, and it's factored in with the West Test scores. And if you look, we do fairly well on that, but sometimes some of this may just be 2 students, some of it may be 4 students, and so forth is all that's taken out. Each county is only allowed to give 1% of their students the alternate assessment. And then here is the, and if you look, there's nothing in the 9th, just science in the 10th. With alternate assessment, we may not even have that year we may not have a student in the 9th grade taking alternate assessment. And also they may be, the state that year may just say, we're only going to test the science with the alternate assessment. Okay, now I'm going to kind of go into schools. I kind of color-coded this for you. Green means good. Okay? Green means good. If you look at Ranger and math and reading, 100% of their students tested in both subjects. In all students, they met AYP, special ed subgroup, and the low SES. They met AYP. Okay? Also, in the reading, they met AYP in all areas. But that was, some of these, no, they probably met AYP. But if you see less than 50, they were not accountable for that subgroup. Okay? Because remember, if you only had less than 50, you're not accountable, but it's factored into all students. Okay. If you want to look at the growth at Ranger, last year there was growth in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and then growth from 3rd to 4th. I think that was because of the special ed teacher they had last year. I'm not sure. We'll have to dig into that a little bit. I'm joking, you know that. I'm just teasing. They're excellent teachers, all over this county.
We knew.
Okay, and reading language arts, where it was growth in 3rd and 5th, and also growth 3rd to 4th, 4th to 5th. Okay, if there's any questions, feel free to ask them. Also, one of the things that a couple of 3 years ago, we used to have what we called a standalone writing assessment. Well, when West Test come along, they put the writing in with the reading language parts. And the writing plays a big, important role in factoring in with the reading scores to get your total reading language arts score. And that has been a real emphasis in this county the last 3 or 4 years is writing. Probably 4 years ago, if I pull the data and look where the writing, well, that's Ranger, but for example, you'll notice a lot of schools, the writing now is higher than the reading scores. At one point, it would have been the opposite. And there'd been a real focus on writing. And I talked to Ms. Coburn, and we talked about that, and we said, are we doing too much that we're hurting our reading? And she said, well, we're going to have to sit down and really look. You can't write too much, but we may need to get back to some of the other things we were doing in reading. Okay, Midway met AYP in everything except low SES reading. And if you look, they made it with confidence interval averaging, which took 3 years, last 3 years scored, and averaged them together to meet AYP. Okay, in math, you can look at the scores. There was not any growth at any grade level, but it still met AYP with averaging. And in reading language arts, there was growth in 3rd and 4th grades. Okay, and for example, you can look at Midway's writing. West Hamlin. Then at AYP everywhere, straight up. They did not, of course, you know, they really turned the tide over there and do a great job over there. Like, okay, there was growth in grades 4, grades 5, and growth in 4th to 5th. In reading language arts, you can see there was growth in the 4th and 5th, and growth 4th to 5th, following the students. Okay, and then there's the writing, and it's really been an emphasis over there. Before West Hamlin was meeting AYP, the writing scores were way below the reading scores, and they really focused, and the writing, I think, is really what's pulled up their reading language arts score. And I think Mr. King would attest to that also.